Great skills again by him. Oh, marvellous goal by Lampard.
Welcome to the Rangers Journey.
Guys, good evening. We're finally over Monday. We're one day closer to the return of Rangers Football Club coming back to Ibrox on Saturday, a game against Livingston. But what we're here tonight, we're actually here to talk about just international football in general and where does it sit within the football calendar and your excitement levels. So we're just going to have a general brief discussion. I would encourage everyone who's watching to make comment, tell us what you think about international football. Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you think that it could be something else here? But it's just a kind of general open floor to a Q&A, if you like, just about international football. So feel free to participate, put your comments on, your thoughts, and everything's very much open for discussion. There'll be no prejudice against people's views tonight. And I'll put my cards on the table early doors, guys. I like international football. I follow the Scotland team. I always have, I always will. I've been to several Scotland games in the past, and I was lucky enough to fulfil a lifetime ambition last year when I went out to Germany for the Euros, and I watched Scotland playing a major international tournament. So the first time that the stadiums were open, obviously during COVID, they couldn't do that, and prior to that, it was the World Cup in 1998. And I'm sure there's plenty of people watching who weren't even born in 1998. So tell us what you think. I'm probably not that their views are more important, but I'm very much keen to hear about people that weren't around in 1998 if you weren't born back then. But Doug, listen, I'll come to you first of all, mate. Just your thoughts. Are you well? You keeping okay? Are you bored like you're not with missing Rangers? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks. I think one of the upsides with Rangers is even when we're not playing, there's always plenty of news. And obviously we've had that video from Thelwell, we've had some new appointments, so there's always things going on to keep us interested in the Rangers. But yeah, doing not too bad, thanks.
Brilliant, mate. Brilliant. Greg, you doing okay? Did your connection get a bit better? You look frozen there. I will come back. He's got a blank expression face. Scotty, we'll come to you next of all, mate.
How's it going? All right, you well?
I'm doing fine, mate. I'm doing fine. Yeah, I'm doing okay.
Sorry, I've got some technical issues myself tonight, but I think we should be all right just now. Hopefully,
I don't think you're alone with that. I think Craig's looking a bit worse for wear as well, as far as the connection's concerned. Yeah, I'll take you off stage just now, mate. We'll see how we go. Grand. You okay, Doug? Is that a problem with me?
No, all seems, well, certainly on my end, all seems fine with you anyway.
I think the lads are maybe just struggling with the difficulty there. Grand. I think we've got Craig back. We'll get this going here. Here we go. You hear me now, Scotty?
Yeah, hopefully. Just my laptop's been playing up today, and it's not syncing my WhatsApps, and I'm having to use my iPhone now, and every now and then I'm losing the volume completely. I've not been on the pod for a couple of weeks. It's no my return that I wanted to have tonight.
Well, we'll give you one more strike, mate. If it freezes again, we'll see you another time, all right? So
I'm sure we'll be all right.
Aye, great. Well, listen, give me your thoughts. Give me your, a quick opinion on international football as a whole. Not necessarily the Scotland team, but just in general. What do you think about international football?
I've never been too enamoured with it, if I'm honest with you. It's kind of always been something that's got in the way of the enjoyment of club football that I've had. I was never really brought up to be really an international football fan. But listen, don't get me wrong, I've always wanted Scotland to win. It just doesn't really grab me with the excitement that it has. But I think that's maybe just to do with the fact that there is such a lack of games on a regular sort of calendar season. It's difficult to try and get any kind of impetus towards any kind of excitement for the national team. But
yeah,
I mean, it's a decent enough little sort of takes you away from the disappointment that Rangers can sort of serve you up on a regular basis now. But and it's always a good excuse for a drink as well, and the pubs are always good, let's be honest.
Yeah. So would you say, I mean, I'm not going to say you're a Jacobite tartan army daft, but would you say you're a fan? I think he's away again. I think he's calling it quits there, Doug. Just you and I.
Down to two.
Down to two. Of course, the two best ones. Can't argue with that.
That's it.
Yeah.
We're having Rangers circa 2023 injury problems.
Well, listen, talking about international football, right? So, thinking about where it is, the kind of general opinion is a lot of people don't like our players going away, right? But the thing about our players going away, obviously, international duty, is that, maybe get some game time. I'll give you an example that I was just kind of checking in where the football scores were so far tonight, that Oliver Atman's actually scored and assisted for Finland so far. Do you think that's something that, maybe players who aren't getting as much game time as that, that gives them an opportunity to get minutes and hopefully grow a wee bit of confidence and he goes back with a bit of a spring in his step?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, we can talk about the interesting thing about this topic, I think, is we can approach it from a number of different points of view, because you can look at it obviously just from a fan point of view, from the unique sort of position between Rangers and Scotland specifically, which the guys are going to talk about tomorrow. And then, like you said there, you can talk about it from a purely practical point of view in terms of, we've got players like Ant-Man, Bajrami as well, who played the other night. If they're not getting minutes with us, it's good that they get minutes with their national teams. If they're still getting selected, it keeps them fresh. It keeps them, as I say, a little bit fitter, a little bit more match fit, most importantly. And like you say, it can do well for confidence and things. I mean, we had whose name's totally disappeared from my head there. Asgard, there we go. We had Asgard, obviously, a couple of weeks ago, went off and scored 4 goals. There's no way that can't... 5 goals, sorry. There's no way that doesn't help his confidence, which is obviously better for us. And I like it when we've got, a mark of a big team is having a squad full of international players and players that are playing at the highest level. And we've got that right now. We've got quite a few players that are playing in their national teams. We've got quite a few players on sort of the edge of their national teams as well. So I think that's a positive. And like you say, it gives these players minutes. It can give them confidence. And then the other aspect as well that we can maybe touch on afterwards is it can be good for the selling of players as well. A lot of talk around Nicholas Raskin in particular, with his contract running up. If he goes to a World Cup and plays well in Belgium, that'll add millions potentially to his transfer value, so that you can benefit the club in that way as well.
Brilliant, mate. Thank you, Craig. Welcome back, mate. All sorted now, in a good place. Can you hear me, Craig?
Aye. I know. I apologise for that, boys. A bit all over the place, but we're sorted now.
No problem at all. No problem. Give me your general overview, and I'm not necessarily talking about the Scotland team. Just your overview and your opinion of international football in general. What's your kind of opinion on
it? I think it depends how far you're looking. If you're looking worldwide, I think it's still very, very popular. I mean, I will never not, I think, in my entire life, not sit down and watch a World Cup or a Euros, regardless of whether or not Scotland are in it. I think there's obviously the Rangers point of view from it, where you can look at how Rangers players who are on international stages, as Doug said, people like Raskin can add millions onto their price tag, which can be good for Rangers. So there's always that sort of thing. I think if you look at Scotland themselves, I don't know. This might be a bit controversial. I'm not sure, but I think there's a generational split with Scotland. I think older generations are getting tired of Scotland, but younger generations are still with it. You can give your own opinion on that if you like, but I think there's a generational split with Scotland. I still tend to watch the games, but I've noticed people a bit older than me tend to just give it a miss and just wait for the club football to come back. So you can maybe give your opinions on that if you wish.
Yeah. There was a wee question just coming from Shona here. I'll place it to you, mate. How can you do it in international duty but poor performance for Rangers? Asgard only 1 goal, 1 assist. Ant-Man with two assists and 0 goals. Maybe just obviously excluding tonight. But maybe probably another example, that's how well Nico Raskin seems to play for the Belgian national team. He comes away with rave reviews, but he's probably not quite hitting the levels that we expect him to.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think for me, there's kind of two, there's sort of two aspects to that. One is simply, and particularly with someone like Raskin and Asgard, look at the players that are surrounding them when they're playing for their national team. I mean, Asgard's playing with Haaland, Nusa, Sorloth. I hate to say it, but Ayer. These are top players that are playing in top leagues and got loads of buzz about them. There's Pedersen as well. What's the Arsenal boy's name as well? Odegaard. Yep, Odegaard.
Yeah.
These are players that would walk into our team every day of the week. So, so there's an element of that. Obviously, Belgium full of quality players as well. So there's an aspect of that. But then also, I think for some players, and especially if we consider this particular season up till now, if you can imagine, obviously, these players have been at Rangers, huge pressure on them. They're playing for a manager that's getting chanted to GTO or were, sorry. They're constantly drawing. They're not getting to win games, etc., etc. The national team is probably a welcome break from that pressure and that terrible atmosphere that was surrounding the club. So I can imagine it probably feels a little bit like, okay, with the national team now, and fair enough, you're still trying to qualify for competitions, and there's still pressure and things there. But I can imagine, in a way, for some of them, it's a welcome break from what they've been having to deal with at club level. Raskin as well, obviously, it was obviously butting heads with management and things like that. So I can imagine there's a little bit of that. And obviously for a club like us, where the pressure is pretty much 24/7, 365. As I say, I can imagine particularly for some of the ones that are maybe playing for the smaller countries, that there's less pressure on them to be qualifying and things like that. There's probably a wee bit of that. I do think that players, I do believe that players play better when you manage that stress and pressure appropriately. And if you've not got a manager that's able to do that, which I don't think we did previously, then that's part of the reason why you're not able to turn things around. Whereas if you've got a good managers help their players to handle that pressure and to deal with it properly, to channel it properly. And so, I can imagine some of these players have gone off, felt a little bit better, played with their teams. As I say, because it probably felt like a little bit of an escape from all the crap that was going on here.
Yep. I want to try, obviously, it's a Rangers podcast, so I want to try and keep a kind of Rangers slant on if I possibly can. There's a pod tomorrow night about Tuesday night's pod is going to be about Rangers and basically our relationship with the Scottish national team, and why do Rangers fans, why have we lost our affiliation, why have we lost our kind of, our like towards it as such. There's, I dare say probably 75%, just throw a number out there, of our fan base probably don't like Scotland. Probably would rather just not watch Scotland. If Scotland were playing, they'd probably draw their curtains in their garden. They would probably draw their curtains as such. So, Craig, just keeping it kind of relevant to Rangers, and this is a kind of opinion that exists, and maybe something that's a wee bit forgotten about. I think it was around about February 2022. Rangers were obviously in an incredible run in Europe, and our main striker at that point in time was Morelos. Obviously done really well against Dortmund, done really well against Belgrade, and I think he's seen us more or less into the quarterfinals with Braga. But he was carrying a thigh injury, and he insisted on going to his national team, which resulted in him aggravating that thigh injury to the extent he wouldn't play again for the rest of the season. Would you agree with the opinion that Morelos actually going on international duty potentially cost us Europa League?
I think that's a fair point. If you look at how we went on in the Europa League run to the point where we had Joe Aribo playing as a striker, because we didn't have any strikers available. Kemar Roof was going through one of his long injury patches. I think he came on in the final, didn't he, Roof? But he was going through one of his long injury patches. So I think that's a fair point. I think with players, the issue with it, certainly a guy like Morelos, is that guys like that are really passionate about playing international football. Probably more passionate than Scottish players are about playing for Scotland. A guy who came from nothing to become an international football player. It's something that's really, it's a proud fact for him that he managed to do that. So playing for his country just holds that extra bit in his heart. But I think if you look at it from a Rangers point of view, yeah, it possibly did cost us the Europa League because we did not have a striker available to play, certainly from the start in the final. So yeah, that's I think that's a fair point.
Would you go along with that, Doug? Do you think Morelos possibly made the wrong decision at that point? Do you think it was maybe? Do you think from a Rangers point of view we weren't strong enough to tell him that he wasn't allowed to go? We didn't believe he was fit to travel.
Well, I mean, I think the problem with that is, I don't know how exactly it works, but I mean, if you've got the club saying that the player's not fit, if the player themselves is not fit, and I would assume that their national team, medical team, unless they had reason to say otherwise, would also declare him fit. I don't know how that discrepancy gets sorted out. But I mean, I will never hold it against any player for wanting to play for the country. At the end of the day, for many, that is the pinnacle of your career, being able to represent your country. And it's not something I'd ever hold against someone wanting to choose it. Yes, obviously there's a balance to, and I totally understand where people are coming from when they want to put the club first, and that's fine because that just ultimately depends on your individual point of view. I would never say that he cost us the Europa League because we should be in a position that he should be able to, he getting injured in and of itself didn't leave us with no strikers. Our lack of squad planning meant we didn't because we had a striker that we knew was consistently injured all the time. As I say, he was fit for that game. I don't know how fit he was. Kemar Roofe has said since that he feels he could have played a bigger part, but that Gio ultimately decided that he wasn't sure. So, I mean, that ultimately, is a decision that was still within our control. You can make arguments that Kemar Roofe is a better striker than Morelos as well. So, certainly on a technical level anyway. So, I mean, should we have not had other options available from as the bigger thing? Unless you're talking, and yes, I mean, we did have multiple injury issues, so there is that. But again, as a club, that's something we need to be managing. We obviously know when international breaks are, when international fixtures are, and we need to be able to. It was like we were all talking about AFCON this year around the transfer window and players that were coming in when we were signing players like Giga. When we still had Dessers and Niggerman, we were talking about the fact that, are we going to need to bring someone in if we're going to potentially have a period if those two are still here, if they're away, how are we going to manage that? So we were talking about those things, and I would expect the club to do the same. So I would certainly never blame Morelos. It's just unfortunate. He could have stayed and got injured in training, just as easily. So yeah, as I say, I'll never hold it against a player. There was a similar argument years ago around Craig Moore playing. I can't remember the specific tournament, but he was it might be in the Olympics actually. He left and wanted to play for Australia, and the club didn't want him to go. And I was the same back then as well. That from the Rangers point of view, it was better he stayed, but I'm not going to hold it against him for wanting to go and play for his country. And as I say, I'll not do that for any player moving forward.
I think if I remember right, Craig Moore actually was sold because of that. I think Rangers actually said, if you go, we're going to sell you. We're like the actually transfer list, so much resulted in his short stay at Crystal Palace. Thankfully, they brought him back, and obviously when he wanted to become club captain, he was part of a successful Rangers team. He won a lot of trophies when he was there. Obviously, had a great partnership with Hamaruso. Doug, if I could just quickly stay with you on this, is a name that Sean has brought up here, and this is something as well. Ryan Jack, Ryan Jack constantly was annoying Rangers fans at the time. He was obviously struggling for fitness, and allowing him, allowing all these kind of things. It was niggly injuries, but he kept going to Scotland duty and coming back with niggly injuries and stuff like that. Where are you with this kind of a wee bit more about this employer versus country, right? I know there's this club versus country, but we're his employer, not we as Rangers are his employer. Rangers pay his wages. We keep the roof above his head, but he insists on going to theirs. And I think Ryan Jack, probably at the detriment of his career, should have called time. He needed more of a recovery. He needed to look after his body a little bit better. And he could have potentially, I think he could still be at Rangers. Looking at the players that are in there now, I think Ryan Jack would have a great position within the team. I think somebody like him within the building, obviously a Scottish international, a Rangers influence within the building would be a great thing to have. But he just didn't look after his body well enough. Do you think that Rangers should have we should lean in these guys more to say, look, you're not going. It's as simple as that. You're not fit. We're your employer. We don't think you're match fit to go. You're staying, and that's it.
Well, I mean, ultimately we can't. The rules don't allow us. You're not allowed to prevent a player from going on international duty if they're fit to go. So if he's saying he's fit, that's what I was asking about before. I don't know how it would shake out if if the Scotland team were going, no, he's fit, he can play. He says he's fit, and we think he's fit, but we were going, well, he's not fit. I don't know how that shakes out. I mean, in terms of the financial argument, clubs get paid for players going on international duty, and get compensated if they get injured as well. So I mean, there are financial levers there to balance those things out. It's a catch-22. I totally understand. Like you say, the want to play for your country, and particularly, I mean, obviously, I have no idea how he was thinking, but on one hand, he was aware that he wasn't going to have the longest career, and he wanted to get as many caps as he could. I don't know. It's a difficult one. Ultimately, if the club thinks that that's a long-term issue, or that they don't think they're going to be able to solve it, I think the solution is probably to say, right, well, we're going to sell you then, because we don't think we're going to get the best use out of you. I think there's a difference between, the Craig Moore example that you gave. That was, I don't think that was fair, because that was over one decision in one tournament. But if the club are looking at a pattern and they think, well, they're not, I mean, it's kind of like, I suppose, when you're trying to manage someone with any illness, you're looking at, is there a pattern to this? Is there a long-term impact to the business? And is that something that we can sustain? Now, and then in this instance, if they're saying no, then maybe they need to think about bringing in a different player. Because, like I say, I think it's a catch-22. The club can't prevent you from going, because FIFA rules don't allow that. But at the same time, like you say, if you're constantly seeing a player going off and picking up injuries, and that's then impacting them being able to play for us, then that's something that we need to think about managing in terms of, well, is this a player that we can keep? If that, the same as if they're not going away in international duty and constantly picking up niggling injuries, you eventually get to a point where you're going, right, we can't keep this guy because he's just not fit enough to play.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate. Just going to come here, just another day with Dado Purzle's Blue Boots' brought up here. You remember there was an operation that John Souttar was due to have at the end of the season, but decided to postpone that operation because there was was it friendly games for Scotland? I think they maybe played Sunday.
It was friendly,
yeah, it was friendly games for Scotland at the end of the season there, which nobody, truth be told, who in their right mind really wants to be involved in these games. But Steve Clarke's made it well known that if you drop yourself out of these friendly games, you don't make yourself available, you won't have a part of his team. I think he made Ryan Fraser, when he was at Bournemouth, a bit of an example of what happens if you don't turn up for international duty when you're called. But he's obviously played the game at the friendly game. He's there went in for his operation. Everybody else is back on the grass ready for pre-season. Pre-season obviously started early because of the Champions League campaign, but he's not there. And do you think that's something that, again, that's right, that he should be putting, again, club there over country over club? Is that something where, if you have an operation due, if it's friendly games, somebody, whoever's in charge of the medical side of it, should be on the phone to Steve Clarke or his medical team, say, listen, it's due an operation. We need to get this operation done. He needs to start his recovery. We've got a season coming up. We've actually got a Champions League qualifier at the end of July. It's potentially worth tens of millions of pounds to the football club. We need the money.
Aye, that's exactly it. Look, I'm one person who's strongly on the side of put club before country. although I do enjoy watching international games. I think players should be pragmatic about their clubs, work international games around clubs. Obviously, there's certain rules and standards they've got to stick to in terms of when they're called, they need to go. But I think then it comes down to, like you say, clubs speaking to national managers saying, this guy is in this position. We can't afford to lose him. We've got these important games coming up. Can you just call up someone else? I don't think that's unreasonable to ask an international manager to do that, especially for friendly games. Because as you say, the clubs are, in my opinion, the clubs are more important. There's plenty of people who would say otherwise, but I think your club's the most important thing. That's the team you play week in, week out for 9 months. Internationals come around once every month for a couple of months, and then they're here in March. You know, it's just not right, in my opinion, to put the club second. And then you add in the fact that it was friendly games. Yeah, I don't think it's right, because he was a big miss for the start of that Champions League campaign.
Yep. Can I just stay with you, mate? Do you think football is just in general at this moment in time? Obviously, we've seen the introduction of the World Club Cup now, that was played in the summer over in the States there, and I think that was a wee bit. There's quite a few players that made it, publicly known that they didn't agree with the number of all games. Do you think that players are just being asked these days just to play too many games between all the different competitions, especially if they're involved in the international stage?
Yeah, I think that is a problem. I think the Club World Cup is a ridiculous concept, considering the players are coming off the back of a full season. The top players are playing league games, cup games, depending on what country they're playing in. They've got 2 cup competitions. They're playing international games. They're playing European, European games for their clubs as well. It's just getting ridiculous. You're asking these human beings to act like robots, and it's just, it's not physically possible. So yeah, it's getting too much. There needs to be a point where you're going to rein it in. You think now as well with the new league phase, if you're a Champions League or a Europa League player, you've now got 2 extra games. You'd normally have 6 in the group. Now you've got 8. So you've got 2 extra games there. You're cramming them all in. Players are playing 2 or 3 games a week for a lot of the season. Certainly, as soon as the European games start in late September, depending on how long your club's in the European competitions for, you could be playing 2 or 3 games a week, almost every week from September to, maybe March, April. So it's getting ridiculous. That the number of games these players are getting asked to play. But it's a money thing. Exactly, just the comment you just brought up. It's down to TV rights, because the TV money is the big pool for competitions for clubs. It's TV. They want more games, so they're getting more games.
Yeah, appreciate that, pal. Doug, again, I'll ask you the same question. The volume of international football games that are getting played, obviously the introduction of the Nations League now, which will see into some sort of kind of league format that gets you a playoff for a playoff for a playoff for a playoff. But Scotland, to be honest, they did benefit from at that kind of side of things. So they'd obviously found their way into the Euros last year through that kind of playoff method there. But I'll give you an example. Nico Rask was out in Azerbaijan playing for Belgium during the week there, which is a 4-hour time difference. Do you think things like that, where why are Azerbaijan involved in international football in Europe? Azerbaijan's not part of Europe, neither is Kazakhstan. Why are they part of European qualifiers? And even go out as far as places like Israel and stuff like that. Do you think it should be more regionalised if these players are going to be asked to travel to games like that? Should be looking to try and kind of regionalise it more?
Well, I mean, in terms of the first part about sort of the volume of football being played, I think that's primarily a club issue. In terms of it's club competitions that are bulging more and more. I think I mean, you're right. And obviously, the the Nations League has grown. But I think the primary pressure from that is coming from club football, because ultimately all these things are drive to make more money. That's why the tournaments are getting bigger, because you'll make more money. You've got more games, therefore you've got more tickets. You can get more sponsors. It also tends to make it easier for the big teams to qualify, because you've got more, like you said, there's more qualifying spots. That does help sometimes us fringe countries. Obviously Scotland tends to be, or we have typically been for the majority of our lifetimes anyway, the almost but not quite. And it has helped countries that tend to fall into that bracket as well, because again, it makes it a little easier for us. But these things are all a pursuit for money, which is why you're now seeing a lot of the more Middle Eastern countries getting involved, because there's a lot of money in these countries, and so there's money to be made for people like FIFA, for people like UEFA, and you're starting to see more and more arguments. I mean, obviously there was the big Super League thing that popped up a couple of years ago with the English clubs. There's constant discussions that pop up and down with some kind of transatlantic league that, like ourselves and other countries that have got a couple of big clubs, but are generally small countries, so like your Belgiums, your Hollands, etc. But bringing it back to sort of international football, it's largely been, I think that you're hitting the nail on the head, and I think the travel is becoming the bigger issue, because with international football, there is, as I say, a push to travel to more areas where football hasn't traditionally been huge, but there's room for growth, i.e. room for profit. So there's a lot more move for countries to move about that way as well. It raises the profile and helps get more eyes on the game. But I do think also most of those things are primarily more club football issues on the grand scheme of things. Usually there's enough time on the whole, I would say, for in terms of international breaks anyway, for the travel involved. You've got players that regardless are traveling large distances. If you've got Australian players from the Americas and things like that, they're going to be traveling large distances regardless. So I think some of those issues are probably more prevalent if we were talking about club level football, because things like that, the expansion of a lot of those competitions, and then the mega expansion of that Club World Cup, which, if you look at some of the teams that were involved in that, like Chelsea, I think were one of the examples where they're going to have players that will not have had a sustained break of any kind for literally about 3 years, because they've gone into one off term competition and another, because you've got the World Cup and things like that, and the amount of football that's been played is just absolutely ridiculous on that level, and I think that is something that's going to have to be addressed eventually.
Yep. Do you think they should be kind of more looking towards like a Middle Eastern football conference, like some sort of football federation? Obviously we've got UEFA, you've got the South American one. Should there be something in place where it's just a kind of more like a Middle Eastern one, where Saudi Arabia are in there, you maybe somebody like people are mentioning about Georgia, Azerbaijan, Israel and stuff like that? Is that maybe something that a solution to solve it, and maybe gives these countries maybe a better chance for qualifying for major tournaments as well? I'm going to come at you on that one, Craig.
Well, I think traditionally people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think traditionally countries in the Middle East tended to try and qualify through the Asian Football Confederation. They moved to UEFA because they got bigger, chances to play bigger nations and chances to make more money. I believe countries like Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, all of those countries in that area, just at the border with China, used to play in the Asian Confederation, and it was just a purely financial deal from both UEFA and those countries, because if you look at a country like Kazakhstan, they put a lot of money into football. They've put a lot of money into football over the past few years, and we've seen it at club level where Kazakhstan have had clubs beating Scottish clubs in European level, and you've seen Kazakhstan national team beat Scotland's national team. So I think it's just a money driver where they've moved from Asia to Europe.
Yep. Well, let's not. We're just out. This won't be a very long podcast now. We don't obviously want to harp on it. There's only so much we can say about international football, right? I'll ask you first, Craig, and guys, if you can, in your comments, please. There's just under 300 people watching this, so a very kind of simple question: is it harder to win the World Cup, or is it harder to win the Champions League? As a player, with obviously irrespective teams and stuff, like, would you say it's harder, or would you say it's a better accolade? Is it a bigger trophy to win, as at club level, the European Cup or the World Cup?
That's a difficult one, because from a teammate, if you're Lionel Messi, you've had 4 World Cups now to win the World Cup. You've finally done it. But as every player that Messi's played with at international level, the level of him, not really. But you look at the super teams he played with at Barcelona and the Champions Leagues that he won at Barcelona, or were those players at Barcelona more on his level? You'd say they were. But what you've got to then take into consideration is that not every top player, sometimes you get international super teams, but majority of the top players, look at Ronaldo at Portugal, these guys, these guys are playing with teammates that are lower level, maybe not every single teammate, but are lower level international. And then the other thing with the World Cup is that the World Cup only comes around every 4 years, and you are playing some absolute dross, especially this year now that the competition is getting expanded to, is it 48 teams?
64, I think.
So you are going to end up.
It's bonkers.
Is it 64?
Maybe the next
Jesus.
one. Or it's mentally, anyway, it's too many.
Aye, so you're playing some absolute dross in the World Cup, whereas in the Champions League you're winning. In the Champions League you're playing. You could be a super team, but there's 3 or 4 other clubs that have built super teams that have got genuine world class players everywhere. The World Cup doesn't have that. So I would say it's more difficult to win. I would say it's more difficult to win the Champions League because it's constant every year, and you've got higher quality of opponents across the pitch.
Cool, Doug. I'll come to you on that one. Also, just to kind of throw in a wee narrative of my own that difficult for me to say because it's a toss of a coin here, but I probably believe that Messi is the greatest player of all time because he has won a World Cup and Ronaldo hasn't. But a very difficult question. I'm sure a question that will probably go on for years to come. Who was the kind of best player? But where would your kind of opinion be if you were to say, as a player, if you were playing professional football, would you say it'd be harder to win the Champions League or the World Cup?
The World Cup by a distance, in my opinion. First and foremost, it only comes round every 4 years, so immediately you've less chance to win it. I mean, there's a reason that Brazil have won the most World Cups with, I think, 5. Real Madrid have got like something like 16, 17 Champions Leagues. I think it's easier as well, and this applies again, particularly to a club like Real Madrid. If you get, like, say, your super team together, it's easier to keep them together for a couple of years and win a couple of Champions Leagues than it is to have a solid set group for your national team and win multiple World Cups over 2 decades, because you've got natural flow. You immediately, if you're a club, the only thing standing in your way is money, and they really, obviously, there'll be 1 or 2 players, that won't come to you because you're Real Madrid and they're Barcelona, or that wouldn't come to play for Rangers because they're diehard Celtic fans. Yeah, you'll get some of that, but ultimately, if you've got the money, you can pretty much get any player you want in the world and assemble your super team. If you're a country, you are limited to players that qualify for your country. Now, that has been that has been stretched ever so slightly. You only need to look at the Scotland squad to see that you can stretch that rule ever so slightly. But ultimately, there is a limit there. You can only create a team out of the players that qualify to play for you. And so that's immediately more difficult to make a winning team. And then that also ties into so many more things that are just out with your control, such as if you are a tiny country with a small GDP and a small population, there's not an awful lot you can do to improve that level of player. Whereas big countries that can invest in football infrastructure and want to spend the time to do that to make their country better can do that. So there's a whole host of things that tie into it as well, if you want to go into it that deep. But I just think on a more simplistic level, though, it's harder to win because you've less chance to win it because it's less frequent, and it's harder to win because you can't just build a super team. So it doesn't, even if you've built a super team and you're playing other super teams, you've still been able to build your super team. Whereas if you're Scotland and you're having to come up against Brazil, France, England, there's nothing we can do if unless we have a great era of Scots come through. There's nothing we can do to change if they're way better than us. Whereas if you're Real Madrid, you can go out and buy players. If the other two teams have gone and improved their clubs, improve their players, you can go out and buy better players to level up with them if you've got the means. So I think from that point of view, it's a case of. I also think as well, I've made this point when talking about European football. There was debate last season about how good the Europa League actually was in terms of the quality of the teams and various other things. And there's a lot of conversation being generated because of the fact that United and Tottenham were doing so well in Europe, but so poorly in their league. And I made the point that as well as the Champions League, most teams play in a similar way because ultimately they're coming from a similar football culture to some degree. There are big differences between countries, but European football, we tend to play, that kind of European continental style. Whereas once you do start going out to different continents, you really do get different styles of football, different ways of playing. If you take a country like Uruguay, which have a load of skillful players, but they're real fighters, they're real niggly, without swearing, I can't really describe them properly, I don't think, but they're real niggly bees. They will bite you, as some famous examples go. There's a real sort of do or die feel about them to the style of football that they play, as opposed to say like France, who really want to play that kind of beautiful, more languid kind of style, to the Dutch, who want to play total football. And I think, again, when you're in a World Cup, you have to combat those different types of football, as well as just coming up against teams that play in a similar way to you, which I think is a bit easier to fight. And I think that's the same thing about why these tournaments can be good, because there is a level of it within European football, because ultimately, teams in Europe from different countries do play differently, but I think there's more similarities. The differences tend to come more because, for example, we have to play differently because we can't afford to build a team as good as, say, Man United or Atletico Madrid, for sake. So when we're coming up against these teams like the Dortmunds or the Leipzigs of the world, we have to play in a slightly different way because they can afford better players than us. So, they'll come and look to beat us with basically just by trying to play better football. Whereas that's why we need to have those players that have the fight and the energy and the will to work and to make true the argument about, what's the phrase? About good football versus hard-working football,
Hard work beats talent, and talent doesn't work hard.
That's the one, exactly. So, you need things like that. And so I think there's a level of that as well. So, yeah, I think for me, it's the World Cup.
Okay, buddy. Listen, I'm just going to quickly bring you back around to Scotland and the national team again, just quickly before we finish. So there's going to be a pod tomorrow night, guys. Time to be confirmed. So obviously, we don't want to clash with the football, just for those who will take it on, either to watch Scotland win or watch Scotland lose, whatever takes your fancy. Couple of plugs here. The Bluebells Bar in Porto del Carmen, Lanzarote. if any of you are just like me and are sick of the cold weather and would rather be in warmer climates, if you fancy jumping down to Lanzarote, Kenny and the team will look after you if you pop in there for a pint. They do show all the Rangers games, and I'm led to believe they will also show a couple of the podcasts as well. It's separated. So the Bluebells Bar, Porto del Carmen is where you want to be. And you also see there that we're actually in the middle of just producing a clothing range. We're actually going to dip into merchandise, which is something I'm particularly keen to see. So there'll be some stuff on there that will come. Obviously, there's a big day coming up next month, and if you're struggling for present ideas for your like-minded Rangers friends and family, then why not jump over at the Rangers store on Etsy and see what you can get on there. All right. Greg, one thing that I was thinking earlier on, and I was trying to think about reasons why Rangers fans in general do not like the Scottish national team, and what's there. And obviously, the obvious thing is that Rangers fans don't agree with what happened in 2013, where we were demoted to the third division of football, of Scottish football, and that's probably one of the main reasons for it. But there's a lot of Rangers fans that at this moment in time don't like our board. They don't like Patrick Stewart, they don't like Kevin Thelwell, but they obviously still love our team and they love Danny Rowe. Is that something that we can kind of draw a comparison on, that you don't necessarily need to like the regime, but you can like the team?
I mean, potentially. I think your issue with that comparison is that when you're watching Rangers, the team's full of Rangers players, and certainly if you were watching a Gordon Strachan Scotland team, that team was mostly full of Celtic players, which makes things a bit more difficult for Rangers fans to enjoy. I think that I think that Scotland is, it's whether you like it or not, is your country. I think it's just, you just have to kind of accept who's playing, what's going on, who's the manager, and there's not really much you can do with that. But your club is a different entity, because it's something that I go back to club over country. I strongly believe club over country. It's something that is more ingrained in your heart, in my opinion, is your club. So it's harder to accept when it's mismanaged or when you feel the wrong people are in charge of it. But it's also more difficult to pull yourself away from it. Whereas Scotland, I don't think there's the same feeling. So I think it's easier for people to pull away from Scotland when they see things like, the 2012, 2013 Rangers getting demoted and all that stuff. It's easier for people to draw themselves away from Scotland, whereas with Rangers, they just, or whatever club you support, you just can't do it. It's just in your mind, it's in your heart. You just can't pull away from your club like you can your country.
Craig, though, do you ever see it as a slight opportunity, though, to kind of maybe enjoy games of football with people that you normally can't do? Now, probably the most obvious one is that my missus' brother-in-law is a diehard St Mirren fan. He's a Paisley boy through and through. He's a season ticket holder at St Mirren, and we sit and we talk for hours about football and how much we love football, and as such there. But apart from next month, I don't ever really want to see St Mirren winning, right? But it's one of these things that when Scotland are playing, me and him can sit in the pub and we can support the same team. We can really properly enjoy each other's company and celebrate goals and stuff like that together. There's a lot more kind of opportunities with that. And not necessarily, because you don't necessarily need to like football to get behind your country.
I know, absolutely. That's fair. Look, I'll be watching the Scotland game tomorrow in a pub with a group of people who support many different teams. And we'll be going together, hoping that Scotland can win. So I completely understand your point. I completely get your point. Yeah. I just it's just a thing for me, that club, I don't know, just maybe I'm the only one, but I feel like club is just more, it's just that level above. But absolutely, it's a chance to do something. It's a chance to kind of celebrate football almost as kind of one together, all the clubs supporters coming together, which is nice. That's true. But
I wouldn't say we want to do it every week, but it does make a nice wee change on occasions. But
absolutely,
because although football rivalries do exist and stuff like that, obviously we are all friends at the end of the day to a certain extent.
Absolutely. No, yeah, absolutely. As I say, I'll be in a group of people tomorrow who support 5 or 6 different teams, sitting watching the Scotland game together, all hoping for the same result. So you absolutely have a very good point there.
Brilliant. Doug, just one last wee thing just before we start to get finished up with something that another reason why maybe Rangers fans don't particularly like to go and watch Scotland games. We're lucky enough that we probably go to Hampden more than most teams. And obviously, we're well aware that I don't think there's any Rangers fan that can say they actually like Hampden as such as a stadium, as a facility, the atmosphere and stuff like that. I couldn't think of anything worse than going to watch semi-finals and cup finals at Hampden. I'd rather flatten the thing in the early 90s and rebuilt the whole stadium that's there. Do you think that's maybe something that just doesn't really, encourage Rangers fans to go and watch Scotland because we're going towards what's basically a rubbish stadium?
It's harder for me to really comment on that, I think, because I don't really get to many matches compared to most fans. It doesn't really make much of a difference to me, to be honest. I've been to most of the stadiums in Scotland, and when I follow like my local team, Wick Academy in the Highland League, I've been to some barely existing stadiums, and it doesn't really. Most of the time, the stadium doesn't make that big of a difference. It's about the football. I do see what you're saying though, and it certainly can make a difference, particularly for big events and finals and things like that. If you're going to a stadium and it's crap, it's the same. It's the same as going to any kind of venue for a big event. I think if the venue's poor, yes, that will detract from it. But I don't think that I wouldn't say that's a big thing in the grander scheme of things. It's interesting. Like I find it interesting when Craig said earlier that he thinks that older people are more disconnected than younger people to the national team, because I had actually thought it was the other way around. And again, this is just sort of from my sort of point of view, because I think generally, to my mind anyway, the older fans disconnect more comes from the club identity. The club ultimately has obviously a unionist identity, which is obviously strongly connected to Britain as a country and the monarchy, etc. And obviously Scotland as an independent thing. And so I thought, there's a bit of a wedge there in terms of the cultural identity of the club with the country. However, I think I kind of got the feeling that, that wasn't a huge issue on the broader scale of things. Whereas with younger fans, and I'm saying younger to mean probably my age and down, so like under 40, there's more contentious issues between the club and the SFA, which I think have created divisions. So things like obviously getting kicked out of the league. The year we had the massive 2008, when we had the massive fixture pile up, and there just was zero interest in helping us by moving games around, things like that. Obviously the issues with the perceived imbalance in refereeing. I think there's a lot of issues in the last sort of 20, 30 years like that I feel like have driven wedges between Rangers fans and the feeling of just Scotland as a broader entity, even though a lot of that is more to do obviously with the league issue than the national team. But I think people don't really pull those two apart. So in my mind, I kind of feel like younger people would be more disconnected because of those multitude of issues. And I think it's probably those type of things that are the bigger issues rather than the stadium. But I am happy to be corrected on that by fans that go to more regular games, because as I say, I don't get to that many, particularly Hampden matches. I've probably been maybe less than 10 in my lifetime, so I'm happy to be corrected on that issue. But I think it's broader things that cause the divide rather than just the stadium.
It's maybe just for fans that are kind of on the fence with it, where you're like, I'm neither here nor there for the national team. And it's like, oh, a game, right? Who they playing? Right, sounds like, where are they playing? Hampden? Nah, no for me. Can't be bothered going there. Nightmare to get parked at, nightmare to get to, nightmare to get away from. No for me. I'll just watch on the TV. I think it's just that's maybe just a deterrent from it. So maybe just clutching at straws and looking for excuses. But anyway, listen, we'll round it up, guys, on 55 minutes. That's a good number. 55 for too long, mind you. But anyway, we'll get moving on, guys. The boys are on tomorrow night talking about the disconnect between the Rangers Football Club and the Scottish national team that are borderline the SFA as well. So if you wouldn't mind tuning in tomorrow night, guys. If you have liked what you have watched and you haven't liked and subscribed, head over to YouTube and hit the wee like button, the wee bell, and you'll get a notification every time we turn live. But appreciate all your comments, guys. Appreciate everyone tuned in. Craig, before we head off, any final thoughts?
Just the whole thing with just on what Doug was saying, the thing with the Zenit game, the fixture pile up and things like that. That's just I just wanted to kind of double down on that because I think that's a massive issue that really turned a lot of people off. And again, as Doug said, people don't make the distinction between the league and the national team. They kind of just put them together. But yeah, I think that was a big, maybe not the start of it. Certainly for me, it was the start of not understanding why would you not help the club. And then 2012, 2013 is when a lot of people disconnected. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the when I said about the generational split. I'm going off my own back. I'll say I'm in my mid-20s. Look mid-30s, but actually mid-20s. I have seen many people around my age going to Scotland games home and away, spending a lot of money to follow the national team. I haven't seen as much for people as in older generations, which is my main reasoning for that point. Although I think Doug made a good point with the disconnects.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate all your input, and thanks for persevering with your bad Wi-Fi at the start, mate. Doug, anything before we head off, pal?
My last point would just be if you don't think international football is any good, or you don't think people are interested, then go watch Ireland against Hungary and the passion and the excitement and how that game ended. It's good a game of football, and it's an exciting experience as you could have. And yeah, as I say, if you think international football's dead, give that a watch and come back to us.
It's amazing how all these Irish teams always seem to score goals in the last minute, isn't it?
Scotland just had a good striker. I've been saying it for decades. That's my last point. If Scotland could just have a good striker, we'd be a better team.
Mate, and before that Shea Adams is murder. Absolutely murder. Hopeless.
Can't slate his effort, but yeah, we just
listen, you put me in the number 10 Scotland jersey and ask me to run a bit. I'll give you all the effort you want. That doesn't make me a football player.
Very true.
It's that shot when he's got half. I'll give him half an open goal because there is a player there and there's another one sliding in, but he tries to bend it back across to where the one player is instead of just hitting it, opening his foot and hitting it in the opposite corner. It baffles me. And Scott, you compare Scotland for 10 years ago, or maybe a bit longer than maybe 20 years ago, from McFadden, Miller. Who else did they have up front back then? And this isn't even a really good Scotland team either. They didn't qualify for any competitions.
Kenny Miller was a talisman. McFadden obviously scored a lot of goals from as well.
Yeah, so, and you compare that to Lyndon Dykes and Che Adams and Lawrence Shankland's the only one I'll hear an argument about, but he's still not on McFadden Miller level. Aye. If Scotland had a striker, Scotland would win the World Cup.
Absolutely. That's all that's missing.
Aye. Anyway, listen, guys, we'll head just coming on to the hour now. Thanks very much, guys. Take care. Have a great week. Looking forward to Saturday. Every night is a Rangers Journal night. Take care.
Every night is the Rangers Journal night.